spread of diseases, because they don't fall off the heaven, but they just sort of come in with something, with human or with animals or whatever. And so the thing is really, we want to say, where is the risk the highest? Because we always have limited resources, be it for surveillance or be it for disease control. And so we want to say, where's the risk the highest? And that's where we have to concentrate our resources. And so therefore, we want to look what factors play a role, what are the risk factors, and we want to combine them. And that's sort of like what Work Package 1 tries to do, or is doing actually. It's creating a risk framework. So it's combining different risk levels.
So I think of this work package a bit like a team of detectives who are looking at the big picture and then trying to sort of find clues.
That's pretty close. That's pretty good. And epidemiology is virtually disease detectives. And so what we do is really like, we have those different risk factors, like that for certain diseases, like for lumpy skin disease, what Defend is also addressing. The cattle trade is a major risk factor, because you can bring cattle into certain areas, and with the cattle you can bring diseases. And I mean, Corona has shown us very well how beautiful we can transmit the disease across the whole world just by traveling from one place to another place. And so our animals can also carry disease pathogens and bring them along. And so you have the cattle trade, but then you also have maybe flies or whatever vectors which might play a role. Or if you look at African swine fever, which is the other disease which we are looking in Defend, it's sort of the wild boar carries the disease. So if the wild boar comes into your area, then it might bring the disease. And so to combine all those different layers, that's sort of like, as you said, it's sort of the disease detective. And it's trying to find out which of those risk factors are very important. And maybe there are certain areas where we have 2 or 3 risk factors. And so this area is very risky. And that's sort of part of that risk framework, what we are developing.
And with this, I mean, I sort of imagine it in a visual way of, with your magnifying glass, with your binoculars, kind of like going and finding all the clues and then putting it on, like on a wall, like you see in the sort of detective in the crime dramas that you see on television. But I think, there's something to that, isn't there? Because it is actually about mapping out the areas and where those risks, like you say, overlap. So I was wondering if you might be able to explain the participatory risk mapping and the pilot study that we were talking about.
So Hannes Bergman, who is a co-worker of myself, and he actually developed, and just as you said, he put actually a map up on the wall here in the institute, and then everybody was going there like really with the magnifying glass, because we had whole Europe on that map, and it's a huge wall. And then there were different layers which you could see, and you say, well, we show the forest, or we show the peak density and so on. And then people would stand in front of that map and would think, well, what is more important? Here I've got a forest and there I've got cases. So how do they get from one place to another place? And so what the participatory risk mapping actually does is it uses the participation of the different experts or whoever is taking part in that. And it just means that these experts, they are looking at the map and say, okay, which of the factors are critical, which are in my mind critical, so that we have cases moving from one place, or we have new cases sort of like appearing in an area. And so what we often do is we sort of say in our mind, we say, well, we've got those different risk factors. And for my mind, like the forest connectedness, which is sort of like the pathways where the animal go. We've got our roads, so we've got our roads, motorways where we drive with the car, and then the animals, they sort of have their forests and they move along the forest. And so in my mind, the forest is the connectedness, how they are connected. That's a really big risk factor. And in my mind, it might be more important than what we have pig density in there. In other persons, they might judge another risk factor like the closeness to roads. They might judge them more important. And so the participatory risk mapping is actually combining that, so that each expert puts its clues where he or she thinks the cases would occur, puts onto the map. Originally, it was really the map on the board. Now it's all electronically. And then each one of them says, okay, which of the risk factors are the most crucial for this judgment? And with that, we get some ranking because we have different people using that participatory risk mapping. And then in the end, we find that quite a lot of people say actually the forest connectedness is a risk factor for African swine fever. And so that's the plan behind that risk framework with that participatory risk mapping. So it's sort of a way of weighing those different layers, those different risk factors which we have in that risk framework.
And it's almost like a sort of geographical reporting mechanism where obviously lots of people can say these are the things that I consider to be risk, and you build and you build and you build until you have quite a broad list, I imagine, of all these different things that could be your little red dots on the map. These are the things that are going to affect
exactly
the spread of the disease.
Exactly. So we start off and we say, okay, these are the cases this month, and where do you think they will occur next month? And then we see then the months after, we know where the cases occurred. So we also have some sort of validation in there. And we see which of the risk factors which the experts thought would be really important are really important in terms of, yes, they predicted where the cases occurred. And that is something which we try to do in that risk mapping.
And it is that, isn't it? It's a prediction model that I'm sure actually we never want to see the spread of the disease, but when we do see it, and if it is going to places where there was a prediction it would go, it does validate that prediction. So it's almost a confirmation, isn't it, that expert, that person who made that prediction was correct in the first place.
Exactly. And that gives us the clues which of the factors were important, and can we then the next prediction which we do for the next month or for the next year or whatever, can we improve that by using those different risk factors? And so it's all a matter of, we know from the literature, from many experiments, from many field studies, we know that there are risk factors for each of the disease. And but we want to know which ones are the most important, which ones are the ones for the prediction, really the crucial ones.
It's such an interesting work package, and it's really an important area of just to think about, really, just to sort of think about and explore, and to have that input and layer it all together and build on, keep building and keep building. It's really fantastic, and I'm quite interested in how you think work package 1 works, almost symbiotically with the other work packages within Defend. Where the connections are and how you see them all kind of working alongside each other.
Well, the beauty of this work package is that it can use the results of all the other work packages. Because, like, for example, if you do work on vaccine for African swine fever, then this might be also an idea where we say, okay, do we use it in domestic pigs, or do we use it in wild boar, where we have a lot of wild boar? There are certain areas where we might not even get a vaccine out there because it's inaccessible. So we could use that as a different risk factor, or as a different layer in there. Or if you think of work package 6, where you look at the domestic pigs and how they get infected and what are the risk factors for them. And those risk factors can also be used as layers in our risk framework. Or if you look at work package 3, the migration, that's sort of like, if you think about the people move, and if you have migration or movements of people, then they have their own habits, their own traditions. And if you think about it, I mean, food always tastes the best if it's made like mums. So people who come from different countries, they bring their food, they bring their tradition, and so often inadvertently they might bring also pathogens and diseases with them because they bring their traditional food to whatever country. So that knowledge of where do people go, how do people migrate, that is quite crucial also as a risk factor, as a layer in our risk framework. And so that's the beauty about work package 1. It connects everything together.
And it's true because, we were talking about the forest connectedness and how the animals move around when we're talking about wild animals, wild boar. But, humans are responsible for the movement of their cattle, their pigs, the animals that they keep. And if they're moving around and moving their livelihoods, then we certainly do have that as an element to consider. There's an element of risk there too. So these are all things that contribute to the bigger picture, and certainly, work package 1 contributes hugely to defend, and then we all work together. All those work packages work together and fit together. It's like a big jigsaw puzzle, I think of it.
It is.
I always think of how it appears, these the detectives with their magnifying glasses and the overall picture that we have for defend as a jigsaw puzzle.
But I think the jigsaw puzzle will never be finished because we always have other jigsaw puzzles which come in. So it's a great comparison. But I think research is really where every time you put a new puzzle piece on there, and we will never be finished.
It's probably the case. It certainly feels that way, doesn't it? Sometimes that we'll never get to the end.
Yeah.
So when we talk about, what, sort of in a way talking about this jigsaw puzzle and what we're going to see, what are we going to find? What is it going to mean? The results and all the work and all the research, and what is the information from the research that we're going to get, and how is this going to inform or influence sort of wider policy, or changes that will be made and things people can do differently? What do you think the purpose or the influence of work package 1 is in that wider picture?
The aim of the work package, as you said before, is sort of the prediction. Where does the disease occur? Where are my risky areas? When are my risky periods? Also, this might be a point. And so the aim of the work package is to pinpoint those risky areas or those risky times. And then people or agencies who are responsible for disease control, they then can concentrate on those areas and can say, okay, I know this is the risky area where I, for example, get African swine fever. So I concentrate my surveillance effort into that area. And because we're never going to have unlimited resources. They are always limited, and we have to focus and we have to prioritize, and we have to and even if you look at the European law, it puts more emphasis, because we learned over the last decades that it's more important to look at risk-based areas and not just sort of cover the whole area. And it's the same when we cross the road. If we cross a really wide road, we are more vigilant. We look left and right, and we sort of we put more attention on that. Whereas if we're in the forest and we cross the road, we don't care. We just cross the road. We might look left and right, but that's it. And that's the same with disease control. In certain areas where we know where we have a big risk, we have to look more detailed and more concentrated and more vigilant. And that's what that work package can provide. And so I'm I really think it has got a great potential to inform the policymaker, or at least the disease control agencies and people, to where to look.
And this is obviously, in terms of the model itself, it could be applied to a number of different countries.
Yeah. As it is currently built, it's built for Europe because we are a European project, but we could extend it to Australia, New Zealand, whatever.
Because the principles are there, the principle functions and its purpose.
Exactly. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think it's always really interesting to talk to work package leaders, because we so rarely have an opportunity to have a one-to-one conversation. With COVID and all our online meetings, it's always as groups. And I think I'd really like to find out what attracted you to this work, and how did you end up in this role, and what were you drawn by?
Well, I grew up on a farm, so I grew up with animals, and that was just normal. And I still remember when I finally decided, I couldn't decide what to study, and finally I said, I want to become a vet. I want to become a veterinarian. And I still remember when my father said, you will never be a vet like we imagine a vet to be, treating animals. And I was really like, no, that's what I want to be. And so I started studying, but then I realized, well, he was actually right. I didn't want to treat animals. I mean, that was okay. I wanted to make animals healthy again. But I was more interested, why do they get the disease? Where's the disease coming from? And it's sort of like, as you said before, sort of the disease detective. Where is it coming from? What are the connections and so on? And that's how I started with epidemiology. And that just, is my dream field. And so I really, really enjoy that field. And so after many years abroad and then back in Germany again, I started here at the Friedrich-Loeffler-Institute because it's got great opportunities, because we're the National Institute for Animal Health, and we have got a diverse group here. And so that's how I started here.
That's fantastic. So obviously you went back all the way to your childhood where you grew up with animals, but I think it's almost like you had that forensic detective mindset of wanting to get to the bottom of it, obviously sort of treating the animals, but you were more interested in the prevention and in the control and the root cause of where it even comes from.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, we are so happy that you are working with us on Defend and that you're leading Work Package 1. It's a really interesting area, I think, and it has great potential to influence to inform and influence a great many things as we build towards the end of the project. I'm
very happy to work in Defend because it's such a great consortium, and it's just a great opportunity to work with all those different fields. And so I really, really enjoy it. And a great big thanks to all of you, because you make work so easy for us. So very, very nice atmosphere.
That's really lovely. That's good to know. We're halfway through the project. And, we've got lots more work to do, but it's certainly a good time. I've started halfway through to sort of see what's been happening and what we're doing in the future. And we very much hope to do more sort of interviews and podcasts and get the message of Defend out there. So thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.
It's fantastic to speak to you. Thank you.